Commander Jig Morrison pressed his eye against the scope, his breathing steady and controlled as he surveyed the Taliban compound nestled in the valley below. The morning sun cast long shadows across the rocky terrain of the Hindu Kush Mountains, and the thin air at this altitude made every breath deliberate. His finger rested lightly on the trigger of his Mk-11 sniper rifle, the weapon an extension of his body after 15 years of special operations. "Target acquired," Morrison whispered into his throat mic, his voice barely audible even to himself. Through the crosshairs, he could see Khalil Nazir, the Taliban commander responsible for 3 IED attacks that had killed 12 American soldiers in the past month. Nazir stood on the concrete balcony of the compound's main building, gesticulating wildly as he spoke to his lieutenants. Morrison's spotter, Petty Officer Rodriguez, lay beside him behind the rocky outcropping that provided their concealment. "Wind speed 2 knots from the southeast," Rodriguez murmured, his voice steady despite the tension. "Range confirmed at 800 meters. You have a clean shot, sir." The rest of Morrison's 6-man SEAL team was positioned strategically around the compound's perimeter, waiting for his signal to begin the coordinated assault. This was supposed to be a textbook operation. Eliminate the high-value target, secure any intelligence, and extract before Taliban reinforcements could respond. Morrison had run similar missions dozens of times across Afghanistan and Iraq. He adjusted his scope minutely, accounting for the wind drift and the slight upward angle of his shot. Nazir remained in position, completely unaware that death was aimed at him from across the valley. Morrison's finger began to apply pressure to the trigger, the familiar weight of the weapon steady in his hands. Then Nazir's head simply disappeared. One moment, the Taliban commander was standing there, animated and alive, and the next his skull had exploded in a crimson spray that painted the concrete wall behind him. His body crumpled to the balcony floor like a marionette with severed strings, blood pooling rapidly beneath what remained of his head. Morrison jerked back from his scope, confusion flooding his mind. He hadn't fired. The shot hadn't come from his rifle, yet Nazir was undeniably dead. For a split second, Morrison wondered if one of his team had taken the initiative, but he knew his men better than that. They followed orders, and the order had been to wait for his signal. 3 seconds later, the sound hit them. The thunderous crack of a high-powered rifle shot echoed across the valley, reverberating off the mountain walls with a deep, resonant boom that seemed to shake the very ground beneath them. The sound was wrong, too distant, too powerful. Morrison's trained ear immediately recognized it as coming from an impossible distance. "What the hell?" Rodriguez breathed, his own confusion evident as he swept his spotting scope across the valley. Searching for the source of the shot, Morrison was already moving, swinging his rifle toward the direction of the sound. His scope found the distant ridgeline, over 2 miles away according to his rangefinder. The mathematics of the shot began calculating automatically in his mind. 3,247 meters, accounting for the elevation difference, wind patterns at that distance, atmospheric pressure, even the Coriolis effect from the Earth's rotation. It was a shot that belonged in the realm of theoretical ballistics, not battlefield reality. Through his scope, Morrison found her. A lone figure stood on the rocky ridge, silhouetted against the morning sky. Even at this distance, Morrison could tell it was a woman. Her build, her posture, the way she moved as she worked the bolt action of her rifle with fluid precision. She wore civilian clothes, tattered and dust-covered, blending perfectly with the harsh mountain environment. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and despite the impossible distance, Morrison caught a glimpse of her face as she turned slightly. She was calm. Completely, unnaturally calm. Morrison watched in fascination and growing unease as the woman methodically broke down her rifle with movements so practiced they seemed choreographed. Every motion was economical, purposeful, as if she had performed this exact sequence thousands of times. She packed the weapon into what appeared to be a worn hiking backpack, shouldered it, and began moving across the treacherous terrain with the sure-footed confidence of someone who knew these mountains intimately. "Boss," Rodriguez's voice cut through Morrison's concentration. "We've got movement in the compound. Taliban fighters are scrambling like someone kicked an anthill." Morrison reluctantly pulled his attention away from the mysterious sniper to assess the situation below. The compound had erupted into chaos. Taliban fighters poured from buildings, shouting in Pashto and Arabic, their voices carrying clearly in the thin mountain air. Some were trying to reach Nasir's body, while others were taking defensive positions, clearly expecting an assault. "Overwatch. This is Alpha Team." Morrison's radio crackled with the voice of his team leader positioned on the compound's eastern approach. "We have unknown sniper. Repeat, unknown sniper. Target is down. What are your orders?" Morrison found himself in an impossible situation. Their primary objective had been accomplished. Nasir was dead. But the mission parameters had just changed dramatically. There was an unknown shooter in their area of operations. Someone capable of making shots that defied conventional understanding of ballistics and marksmanship. "All teams, hold position," Morrison commanded into his radio. "Do not engage. We have an unknown friendly in the area." "Friendly?" Rodriguez questioned, his voice tight with disbelief. "Sir, that shot came from over 2 miles away. In these wind conditions, with that elevation difference, it's not possible." Morrison knew Rodriguez was right. He had been a sniper for over a decade, had made shots that other soldiers considered miraculous. But what he had just witnessed transcended the boundaries of human capability. The variables involved in a shot at that distance were staggering wind speed and direction at multiple altitudes, temperature gradients, barometric pressure, humidity, even the rotation of the Earth itself. Professional snipers spent years learning to calculate these factors for shots at half that distance. Yet someone had just made the shot look effortless. Morrison returned his scope to the distant ridge, tracking the woman's movement. She was descending the far side of the mountain with remarkable speed, following what appeared to be a goat path that would be invisible to anyone unfamiliar with the terrain. Her movement pattern was wrong for a civilian, too tactical, too aware of cover and concealment. This was someone with extensive military training. "Sir," Rodriguez said quietly, his voice carrying a note of recognition that made Morrison's blood run cold. "I think I know who that is." Morrison kept his scope trained on the retreating figure, but his attention was fully on his spotter's words. "Talk to me, Rodriguez." 6 months ago, there was a CIA operative who went missing during a Black Ops mission in this region. Sarah Chun. They declared her killer after her team was wiped out in an ambush, but the body was never recovered. The name hit Morrison like a physical blow. Sarah Chun was a legend in special operations circles, a sniper whose kill record was classified at levels above Morrison's clearance. She had been recruited by the CIA, a stray out of Marine Corps Scout Sniper School, where she had broken every marksmanship record on the books. Her confirmed kills numbered in the hundreds, and the rumors about her capabilities bordered on the supernatural. Morrison adjusted his scope's focus, trying to get a clearer view of the woman's face. At this distance, positive identification was impossible, but something about her movement, her bearing, triggered a memory. He had seen Chan once briefly during a joint operation briefing in Kabul. She had been quiet, almost invisible in the room full of operators. But when she spoke about ballistics and wind patterns, even the most experienced snipers had listened with rapt attention. If Sarah Chun was alive, if she had been operating in these mountains for 6 months, it would explain the recent string of high-value Taliban targets who had been found dead under mysterious circumstances. Shots that seemed impossible, kills that intelligence attributed to internal Taliban conflicts or rival factions. Morrison's radio crackled again. Alpha Team to Overwatch. We're seeing Taliban reinforcements moving up the valley from the south. Estimate 20 vehicles, maybe 60 fighters. They're moving fast. The situation was deteriorating rapidly. Morrison faced a critical decision that would affect not only his mission, but potentially the life of the mysterious sniper. If it was Sarah Chun, she was now alone in hostile territory with Taliban forces converging on her position. If it wasn't Chun, then there was an unknown shooter with extraordinary capabilities operating in their area of operations. Either way, Morrison realized the mission had just become infinitely more complicated. Morrison's radio erupted in a cacophony of urgent voices as his team tried to process what had just happened. Overwatch, this is Bravo Team, came the strained voice of Sergeant Mills from the compound's western perimeter. We've got Taliban fighters pouring out of every building down here. They're not organizing for defense. They're running scared. Through his scope, Morrison watched the chaos unfold in the valley below. Taliban fighters were abandoning their positions, some fleeing on foot while others scrambled for vehicles. But what caught Morrison's attention was their behavior. These weren't the actions of men responding to a sniper attack. This was pure primal terror. Rodriguez, you getting this? Morrison muttered, tracking individual fighters through his scope. Look at their movement patterns. Rodriguez adjusted his spotting scope, focusing on the compound. Jesus, sir? They're not just scared, they're terrified. Look at that group by the main gate. They keep looking at the mountains like they're expecting the devil himself to come down. Morrison swung his rifle back toward the distant ridge where the mysterious woman had been. She was gone, vanished into the rocky terrain as if she had never existed. But something else caught his eye movement on a different ridge, nearly a mile to the north of her original position. Impossible, Morrison breathed, adjusting his scope's magnification. There she was again, the same woman, now positioned on an entirely different mountain peak. The distance she would have had to cover in the few minutes since her first shot was physically impossible, even for someone in peak physical condition familiar with the terrain. Sir, Rodriguez's voice carried a note of disbelief. Are you seeing what I'm seeing on the northern ridge? Before Morrison could respond, another shot rang out across the valley. This time, Morrison was watching through his scope as a Taliban fighter who had been directing the evacuation suddenly pitched forward, a spray of blood marking where his chest had been. The man had been taking cover behind a concrete barrier, protected from Morrison's position but somehow vulnerable to the shooter on the northern ridge. The mathematics of this second shot were even more staggering than the first. The angle, the distance, the fact that the target had been in cover it suggested a level of tactical awareness and shooting ability that bordered on the supernatural. That's a 2,800-meter shot through a gap no wider than 6 inches. Rodriguez calculated, his voice tight with professional awe and growing fear. Sir, whoever this is, they're not human. No one calculates wind drift and bullet drop that fast. Morrison's earpiece crackled with intercepted Taliban communications, translated in real time by their intelligence specialist back at base. All units. The Ghost has returned. Repeat, the Ghost is active in Sector 7. All commanders to safe positions immediately. The Ghost. Morrison felt ice form in his veins. Intelligence reports over the past 6 months had mentioned a mysterious figure the Taliban had dubbed the Ghost, a sniper who appeared without warning, eliminated high-value targets with impossible shots, and vanished before anyone could respond. Taliban fighters had begun refusing missions in certain areas, claiming the Ghost could kill from distances that made retaliation impossible. Morrison had dismissed the reports as Taliban propaganda. Psychological warfare designed to explain away their leadership losses. Now, watching this woman operate with inhuman precision, he realized the reports had been terrifyingly accurate. "Movement, movement," Rodriguez called out. "She's on the move again, heading east along the ridgeline." Morrison tracked her through his scope, watching as she moved with a fluid grace that seemed to defy the treacherous mountain terrain. She wasn't running. She was flowing across the landscape like water, finding paths that shouldn't exist, maintaining perfect balance on slopes that would challenge experienced mountaineers. As she moved, Morrison caught glimpses of her equipment. The rifle she carried was unlike anything in standard military inventory, longer than a typical sniper rifle, with a distinctive muzzle brake and what appeared to be a custom scope system. Her clothing, while appearing civilian from a distance, showed signs of tactical modification. Extra pockets, reinforced knees, and what looked like integrated armor panels. "Sir," Rodriguez said quietly, "I'm getting a really bad feeling about this. The way she moves, the shots she's making, this isn't normal human capability." Morrison was beginning to share that feeling. He had worked with the best snipers in the world, had seen feats of marksmanship that seemed impossible to civilians. But what he was witnessing transcended even elite military capabilities. The speed of her calculations, the precision of her shots, the way she seemed to anticipate Taliban movements before they happened. It was as if she possessed a form of supernatural awareness. His radio crackled again with Taliban intercepts. "Command, this is Sector 7. We have visual on the Ghost. She's moving toward the Eastern Valley. Request immediate air support." "Negative on air support," came the reply. "All aircraft grounded until we can confirm her position. She has taken down 2 helicopters in the past month." Morrison's blood ran cold. If this woman, this Ghost, had been taking down helicopters, she possessed capabilities far beyond even the most advanced sniper systems. Anti-aircraft weapons, perhaps, or some form of technology that intelligence hadn't identified. "Boss," Rodriguez's voice was urgent now. "We've got Taliban reinforcements moving up the valley from 3 directions. Looks like they're trying to box her in." Morrison swung his scope toward the valley floor, counting vehicles and estimating troop strength. At least 60 Taliban fighters were converging on the Eastern Valley where the Ghost was heading. They were moving with purpose, following what appeared to be a predetermined plan. This wasn't a spontaneous response. They had been preparing for this. "They've done this before," Morrison realized aloud. "This is a coordinated operation. They've been hunting her." Through his scope, Morrison watched as the Taliban forces deployed with military precision. They weren't just fighters. Many of them moved with the discipline of former military personnel, possibly foreign advisors or mercenaries. Their equipment was better than typical Taliban gear, including what appeared to be advanced communication systems and night vision equipment. "Sir," Rodriguez said, his voice tight with concern, "if they've been hunting her for months and she's still operating, what does that tell us about her capabilities?" Morrison didn't want to consider the implications. A single operator who had been evading capture while systematically eliminating Taliban leadership for 6 months, making impossible shots and disappearing like smoke. It suggested either technology far beyond anything in the American arsenal, or human capabilities that defied conventional understanding. His earpiece crackled with another Taliban intercept. This one in heavily accented English. "The American CIA weapon is in the Eastern Valley. All units converge. The general wants her alive. Repeat, alive. She has information we need. CIA weapon." The phrase sent chills down Morrison's spine. If the Taliban were referring to her as a weapon rather than an operative, it suggested they knew something about her nature that American intelligence didn't single quotes T. Morrison made, a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. All teams, new mission parameters. We're moving to intercept the unknown shooter. Maintain distance and observe only. Do not engage unless fired upon." "Sir," Rodriguez protested, "we don't know what we're dealing with here. If the Taliban are this scared of her, maybe we should—" "Rodriguez," Morrison cut him off, his voice carrying the authority of command. "If that's Sarah Chun down there, she's an American operative in hostile territory. If it's not Chun, then we need to know who has this kind of capability operating in our area of operations. Either way, we're going to find out." As Morrison began packing his rifle, preparing to move toward the Eastern Valley, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was about to encounter something that would fundamentally change his understanding of what was possible in modern warfare. The Ghost wasn't just a sniper, she was something else entirely. Something that existed in the shadows between human capability and technological impossibility. And now, whether she knew it or not, she was walking into the most elaborate trap the Taliban had ever constructed. Morrison's team moved through the treacherous mountain terrain with practiced efficiency, but even their elite training couldn't match the inhuman pace they needed to intercept the Ghost before the Taliban trap closed around her. The Eastern Valley stretched below them like a natural amphitheater, surrounded by rocky ridges that would provide perfect overwatch positions for the converging enemy forces. "Overwatch, this is Alpha Team," came the voice of Petty Officer Jackson through Morrison's earpiece. "We've reached the southern approach to the valley. Taliban forces are setting up blocking positions at every exit point. This isn't just a hunt, it's a coordinated military operation." Morrison paused behind a boulder, using his scope to survey the valley below. What he saw made his blood run cold. The Taliban weren't just positioning fighters randomly. They were implementing a sophisticated containment strategy that would make even special forces proud. Machine gun nests covered every possible escape route, while mobile teams with RPGs positioned themselves to counter any attempt at breaking through their lines. "Rodriguez," Morrison whispered, "count the heavy weapons down there." His spotter swept the valley with his scope, methodically cataloging the Taliban positions. "I count at least 8 PKM machine guns, multiple RPG teams, and what looks like a DSHK heavy machine gun on the northern ridge. Sir, this is more firepower than we've seen the Taliban deploy in a single operation." Morrison's radio crackled with another intercepted Taliban communication, this one in clear English with a distinctly foreign accent. "All units, the weapon is approaching the kill zone. Remember, she must be taken alive. The general has specific instructions regarding her interrogation." The clinical way they referred to her as the weapon sent chills down Morrison's spine. Whatever the Taliban knew about the Ghost, they considered are valuable enough to risk a major operation and significant resources to capture her alive. "Movement in the valley," Rodriguez called out softly. "Eastern approach, moving through the rocks like she owns the place." Morrison swung his scope toward Rodriguez's indicated position and found her. The Ghost was descending into the valley with the same fluid grace he had observed earlier. But now Morrison could see details that made his professional assessment of her capabilities even more disturbing. She moved through terrain that should have required careful navigation, as if she were walking on level ground, never hesitating, never checking her footing, following paths that seemed to materialize before her. More unsettling was her apparent awareness of the Taliban positions. As Morrison watched, she adjusted her route to avoid direct lines of sight from the machine gun nests, staying in dead ground that shouldn't have been visible from her position. It was as if she possessed some form of supernatural tactical awareness. "Sir," Rodriguez's voice carried a note of professional awe mixed with fear. "She knows exactly where every Taliban position is located. Look at her movement pattern. She's avoiding their fields of fire without even looking at them." Morrison was beginning to understand why the Taliban called her the Ghost. Her tactical awareness transcended normal human capabilities, suggesting either technology far beyond anything in the American arsenal or training that had pushed human potential into uncharted territory. His earpiece crackled with urgent Taliban communications. Sector commanders, the weapon has entered the kill zone. All units maintain position until she reaches the center point. Do not engage until the signal is given. Morrison realized with growing horror that the ghost was walking directly into the most sophisticated ambush he had ever witnessed. The Taliban had turned the entire valley into a killing field, with overlapping fields of fire that would make escape impossible once the trap was sprung. "We have to warn her," Rodriguez said, echoing Morrison's thoughts. "How?" Morrison replied grimly. "We don't have her frequency, and any radio transmission might alert the Taliban to our presence. Besides, look at her. Does she seem like someone who doesn't know what she's walking into?" Through his scope, Morrison watched as the ghost continued her descent into the valley. Her pace never varied, her posture remained relaxed, and most disturbing of all, she seemed to be smiling. It was the expression of someone who knew exactly what was waiting for her and found it amusing rather than threatening. "Boss," came Jackson's voice through the radio. "We're picking up chatter about helicopters inbound from the north. Sounds like the Taliban are bringing in air support for this operation." Morrison felt the tactical situation spiraling beyond his control. His six-man team was positioned to observe, not to engage a reinforced Taliban company with air support. But the thought of watching an American operative, that's what she was, walk into certain death or capture, violated every principle of his training. "All teams, prepare for possible engagement," Morrison commanded. "We may need to create a distraction to allow the unknown shooter to escape." "Sir," Rodriguez protested, "we're outnumbered 10-1, and that's before their air support arrives. If we engage, we're not making it out of here." Morrison knew Rodriguez was right, but he also knew he couldn't stand by and watch what was about to unfold. Through his scope, he tracked the ghost as she reached the valley floor, now completely surrounded by Taliban positions. She had stopped near a cluster of boulders in the center of the valley, the exact position the Taliban communications had identified as their target point. Then she did something that made Morrison's blood freeze. She turned directly toward his position, over a mile away, and waved. "Did she just?" Rodriguez began. "She knows we're here," Morrison finished, his voice tight with disbelief. "She knows exactly where we are." The implications were staggering. Morrison's team was positioned in carefully selected cover, using professional camouflage and concealment techniques that had kept them hidden from Taliban forces for hours. Yet somehow, the ghost had not only detected their presence, but pinpointed their exact location from over a mile away. His radio exploded with Taliban communications as the trap was finally sprung. All units engage. Take her alive." The valley erupted in gunfire as machine guns opened up from every direction, their tracers creating a deadly web of fire that should have cut down anything in the kill zone. But as Morrison watched through his scope, the impossible happened. The ghost simply wasn't there anymore. One moment she had been standing in the center of the valley, surrounded by converging fire from 8 different positions, and the next she had vanished as if she had never existed. Morrison swept his scope frantically across the valley floor, searching for any sign of her. "Where the hell did she go?" Rodriguez demanded, his own scope scanning desperately. Morrison's answer came in the form of explosions that began rippling across the Taliban positions. The northern machine gun nest disappeared in a ball of fire, followed seconds later by the RPG team on the eastern ridge. The explosions weren't random. They were precisely timed and positioned to create maximum chaos while eliminating the Taliban's heavy weapons. She mined the valley, Morrison realized with growing awe and terror. She knew they would set up this ambush, and she prepared for it. Through his scope, Morrison caught glimpses of the ghost as she moved through the chaos like a deadly phantom. She appeared behind Taliban positions with impossible speed, eliminated targets with clinical precision, and vanished again before return fire could be directed at her position. Her movements defied not just tactical doctrine, but the laws of physics themselves. "Sir," Rodriguez's voice was barely a whisper. "What the hell are we looking at here?" Morrison didn't have an answer. What he was witnessing transcended every category of human capability he understood. The ghost wasn't just an elite operative, she was something else entirely, something that existed in the space between human potential and technological impossibility. And as the Taliban's carefully planned ambush dissolved into a massacre, Morrison realized that they weren't observing a rescue operation. They were witnessing the birth of a legend. The valley had become a slaughterhouse, and Morrison watched in horrified fascination as the ghost transformed from hunted prey into an apex predator. Explosions continued to ripple across Taliban positions with surgical precision, each detonation eliminating key defensive positions while leaving escape routes intact, not for the Taliban, but for something else entirely. Movement. "Southwest ridge," Rodriguez called out, his voice tight with disbelief. She's hurting them." Morrison swung his scope toward Rodriguez's indicated position and saw the impossible truth. The ghost wasn't just eliminating Taliban fighters, she was manipulating their movement, using the explosions and sniper fire to drive them toward specific locations in the valley. What had appeared to be random chaos was actually a carefully orchestrated tactical symphony. "Sir," came Jackson's urgent voice through the radio, "we've got Taliban reinforcements pulling back from all sectors. They're not retreating, they're regrouping at the northern end of the valley." Morrison felt ice form in his veins as he realized what was happening. The ghost wasn't just defending herself, she was implementing a plan that had been months in the making. Every Taliban fighter in the region was being drawn into this valley, concentrated in a single location for reasons that Morrison was only beginning to understand. His earpiece crackled with panicked Taliban communications. "Command, this is Sector 7. The weapon has turned the valley into a killing field. We need immediate extraction." "Negative," came the cold reply in accented English. "All units maintain position. The general is en route with air support. The weapon must not escape this time." Morrison's blood ran cold. If a Taliban general was personally involved in this operation, it meant the ghost represented a threat significant enough to risk high-value leadership. Through his scope, he watched as 3 helicopters appeared on the northern horizon, not the aging Soviet-era aircraft typically used by Taliban forces, but modern attack helicopters that suggested foreign military support. "Rodriguez, you seeing this?" Morrison muttered, tracking the approaching aircraft. "Those are Mi-24 Hinds," Rodriguez confirmed, his voice grim. "Russian export models, fully armed." "Sir, whoever's backing this operation has serious resources." The helicopters moved into attack formation, their pilots clearly experienced in coordinated assault tactics. Morrison watched as they began their approach to the valley, their weapon systems tracking toward the ghost's last known position. Against helicopter gunships, even the most elite ground operative would be helpless. Then the first helicopter simply fell out of the sky. There was no explosion, no visible impact. The aircraft simply lost power and dropped like a stone, crashing into the valley floor in a ball of twisted metal and flame. The second helicopter immediately pulled up, its pilot clearly confused about what had just happened. "What the hell?" Rodriguez breathed. "Did you see any anti-aircraft fire?" Morrison hadn't seen anything that could explain the helicopter's destruction. No missile trail, no tracer fire, nothing that suggested conventional anti-aircraft weapons. Through his scope, he searched frantically for the ghost, finally spotting her on a ridge that should have been impossible to reach in the time. Since the helicopter went down, she was holding something that definitely wasn't a standard sniper rifle. "Rodriguez, magnify on her position," Morrison ordered. "What is she carrying?" Rodriguez adjusted his spotting scope, focusing on the ghost's equipment. "Sir, that's not any weapon system I recognize. It looks like some kind of directed energy device." Morrison felt reality shifting around him as he processed the implications. If the ghost possessed advanced weapons technology, it would explain her impossible capabilities: the precision shots at extreme range, the ability to take down helicopters, the tactical awareness that seemed supernatural. His radio crackled with intercepted communications as the remaining helicopters tried to coordinate their attack. "Falcon 2, maintain distance. Unknown weapon system has engaged Falcon 1, switching to standoff attack profile." The second helicopter launched a missile from maximum range, the weapon streaking toward the ghost position with deadly accuracy. Morrison watched through his scope, expecting to see the ridge disappear in an explosion. Instead, the missile simply veered off course at the last second, impacting harmlessly into the mountainside. "Electronic countermeasures," Morrison realized aloud. "She's got some kind of jamming system." But even as he spoke, Morrison knew that conventional electronic warfare couldn't explain what he was witnessing. The missile's course correction had been too precise, too controlled. It was as if the ghost had reached out and physically redirected the weapon. The third helicopter, apparently deciding that discretion was the better part of valor, began pulling back toward the northern horizon. But the ghost wasn't finished with it. Morrison watched as she raised her mysterious weapon again, and the helicopter's rotor simply stopped turning. The aircraft entered auto rotation, its pilot fighting desperately to control the descent as it crashed into the valley floor. "Sir," Rodriguez's voice was barely a whisper, "what are we dealing with here?" Morrison didn't have an answer that made sense within the framework of conventional warfare. The ghost possessed capabilities that transcended current military technology, suggesting either access to classified weapon systems far beyond anything in the public domain, or something else entirely. His earpiece crackled with a new voice, older, authoritative, speaking in heavily accented English. "American forces observing from the western ridge. This is General Nazir. You will withdraw immediately, or you will be considered hostile combatants." Morrison felt his blood freeze. General Nazir was one of the most wanted Taliban commanders in Afghanistan, a former Afghan army officer who had defected with significant military resources. If he was personally involved in hunting the ghost, it meant she represented a threat to the highest levels of Taliban leadership. "All teams, prepare for immediate extraction," Morrison commanded. "We are compromised and outnumbered." But before his team could begin their withdrawal, Morrison's scope found the ghost again. She was standing in the center of the valley, surrounded by the wreckage of the Taliban ambush, and she was looking directly at his position. Even at this distance, Morrison could see that she was smiling. Then she raised her hand and made a gesture that chilled Morrison to the bone. She pointed at the northern end of the valley, where the surviving Taliban forces had regrouped, and drew her finger across her throat. The message was clear. She wasn't finished. Morrison watched in horrified fascination as the ghost began walking toward the Taliban positions with the same fluid grace he had observed throughout the engagement. She moved without cover, without concealment, walking openly across the valley floor as if she were invulnerable to the dozens of weapons trained on her position. The Taliban opened fire with everything they had: machine guns, rifles, RPGs, creating a wall of lead that should have shredded anything in its path. But the ghost continued walking, untouched, as bullets seemed to pass through her without effect. "She's not human," Rodriguez whispered, his voice filled with primal terror. "Sir, that's not a human being." Morrison wanted to disagree, wanted to find a rational explanation for what he was witnessing. But as he watched the ghost reach the Taliban positions and begin systematically eliminating fighters with inhuman efficiency, he realized that Rodriguez might be right. Whatever the ghost was, enhanced human, advanced technology, or something else entirely, she represented a paradigm shift in warfare that Morrison's training hadn't prepared him for. She wasn't just an elite operative. She was a weapon that existed beyond the boundaries of conventional military understanding. And as the last Taliban fighter fell silent in the valley below, Morrison realized that the real question wasn't who she was targeting. The question was, what had created her? And how many more like her existed in the shadows of modern warfare? The ghost turned toward Morrison's position one final time, raised her hand in what might have been a salute or a warning, and vanished into the mountains like smoke. The valley fell silent, leaving only the dead and the terrible knowledge that warfare had just evolved beyond human comprehension.